Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Kurenai Choose Naruto as a Husband Part 3. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. The next morning when Kurenai awoke she found herself in a warm place and she slowly opened her eyes and saw white. She blinked and rubbed her eyes and looked again and blinked again as she looked around and then she saw she was being held by Naruto in his female form but it looked different than it did the night before. Kurenai looked around and thought, okay, what the hell happened and why the hell does Naruto have wings? She tapped Naruto on the arm and nothing happened. She tried again and called his name but again nothing happened. She sighed and slowly leaned forward and kissed him and Naruto instantly opened his eyes and closed them again as he returned the kiss. Kurenai giggled as she broke the kiss and Naruto yawned as he stretched and he blinked as his arms rubbed something and he said, okay, what the hell's going on here? As he looked and saw two wings attack to his back. Kurenai got up and looked and Naruto also stood up and Kurenai said, maybe it's just a messed up with your sexy no jutsu Narukun. I mean you may have accidentally changed your mental image for it and this was the result. Try dropping it and see what happened. Naruto nods and said, it's possible, okay here goes. As he dropped the jutsu and when the smoke cleared Kurenai went wide-eyed and said, what the hell? As she looked at Naruto. Naruto now stood at 6 feet 3 foot tall and his whisker marks were gone from his face. His hair had grown longer and he also looked older by a year or two and his muscles looked more defined like a track runner. In fact he looked just like his father but with a pair of white angel wings on his back that stopped at his ankles but went to about a foot taller than him. Kurenai said, Naruto, try moving those wings. Maybe this is some sort of trick by Anko. Naruto nods and thinks about them moving and both wings flap and he went wide-eyed and said, okay, this is weird, I can feel them move and feel each feather and they followed my thoughts. What happened to me? Kurenai said, I don't know, why don't you just sit here and I will go get the Hokage? Maybe this has something to do with Kyuubi. Naruto nods and said, maybe, I will try and talk to it again and see if it has any answers. As he tried to sit down but the wings withdrew into his body like they never were there as Kurenai watched. Naruto said, okay, that's weird. They acted on instinct. As he looked at his back and saw two slits on his shoulder blades. Kurenai said, try and have them come back out. Naruto thought about them coming back out and they popped back out. He then thought of them to leave and they went back in his skin. He said, cool, they follow my commands. I wonder if I can fly. As he was about to call them back out Kurenai grabbed his hand and said, no, not inside. Naruto rubbed his head sheepishly and said, right, sorry about that. Maybe you should get the old man so he can find out what is going on. Kurenai nods and since she was still dressed from the night before when she went to investigate the explosion she used Shushin and left. Inside the Hokage Tower the third was reading over the report from the events of the previous night and thought, so Hinata was able to take them all out last night. Since all of the long-term missions have been cancelled everyone was at home and since no Hyuga were Anbu they were all caught by the explosion. Such a shame. Now with the death of the Hyuga and Uchiha clans Konoha has not been this week since the Kyuubi attack. I can only pray our enemies don't try anything. Just then Kurenai appeared and said, you need to come quick to my place, something's happened to Naruto. The third quickly got to his feet not even bothering to ask what and both shushined away. When they got to the apartment Naruto had his wings back out and a couple of Kujibunshin looking at the wings and each Kujibunshin also had wings and the third said, holy shit, Minato, you're an angel. Naruto glared at him and said, not funny old man, I am not my dad. The third chuckled and said, I know Naruto. Now do either of you have any idea what might have caused this? Both shook their head no and the third said, I see, let me look at the seal Naruto. Naruto took the shredded shirt he had on off and channeled chakra a moment and said, that's weird, where is it? as it did not appear. The third narrowed his eyes and thought, I think I know what happened but I need to check some things first. He then stood up and said, Naruto, try and contact the Kyuubi. Naruto nods and sats down to meditate and after a few minutes he said, it's gone old man, the cage and Kyuubi are gone. I don't understand. The sewer is still there but all the red pipes are all blue now and the room where the Kyuubi was is empty. The third smiled and said, I think I know what happened. Tell me Naruto, were you a male or female this morning when you woke up? Naruto said, female, why? The third said, what does the Vainati doppelganger bloodline do? Naruto said, it makes it WHER, wait you don't mean that. The third nods and said, you must have done something that made the Kyuubi want to leave your body and when that happened it died and you transformed as such, can you retract those wings Naruto? Naruto nods and they pull back in and then the third chuckled and said, Naruto, how would you like to help an old man out with a little problem? Naruto said, sure old man but what can I do and how do you know about the doppelganger? The third said, I am old and wise Naruto and I know a great many things like any good Hokage should. Anyways I want you to go to the Forest of Death Tower and meet Anko, Jiraiya and Kakashi there and figure out how strong you are now and what other effect this change had on your body. Kurenai, I want you also to go with him and I want you to put a genjutsu on him to make him look like he used to because I want to keep this a secret for a few days. I have a plan that will help the moral of the people of Konoha and I will explain more but first I need to know what effects this really had on you. I would have you henge yourself Naruto but I don't want you to accidentally lose control of your chakra and freak out the villagers just yet. Okay. Naruto frowns and said, does Kakashi have to be there? Both Kurenai and the third look at him and the third asked, why? Naruto sighed as he closed his eyes and said, I blame Kakashi for what happened to Hinata sir. Both blinked and Kurenai asked, why? He wasn't the one who killed her, Sasuke was. Naruto said, I know, it's just that he treated Sasuke like he was his own son and ignored Sakura and me and helped give Sasuke such a big ego. I mean it was bad enough when we were still in the academy but after we got on the team Kakashi purposely made it bigger like he was Kami himself and gave him everything he wants. I blame him because if he would not have pampered him then maybe he would not have tried to betray Konoha and then try and rape Hinata. The third thought, Kakashi, you have loose lips but I suppose it's good he does so that way word can spread about my story so people don't look to close. If word got out another clan massacre happened by one of its own in Konoha then people would think something is wrong with Konoha as a whole which could be bad for us now that we are weakened. You also have screwed up with Naruto Kakashi and I don't know what to do to fix it. As he said, alright Naruto, I won't have Kakashi show up but you need to know that Kakashi is not the only one to blame about this. Naruto sighed and said, I know old man and I am sorry. I guess I am still upset with the way Kakashi turned out after I got on his team. I mean when he was in Anbu he was always nice to me and made me feel like a real person but once I got on his team he basically ignored me. He did bring me some fruit once but after that he acted like the only one of us worth his time was Sasuke and then after all that Sasuke was going to betray Konoha just pissed me off and it hurts. It hurts that he always got love and kindness and He was quitted by Kurenai putting her arms around him from behind and she whispered, it's alright Narukun, I know how much it hurts. I am here for you now and you don't have to go through this alone. The third asked, how did you know Kakashi was Anbu Naruto? Naruto said, his smell old man. I learned when I was a kid whose smell I could count as a friend and who I couldn't. I remember the Anbu Inu saving me several times and watching over me in the hospital and at my apartment and I remember him paying for an extra bowl of ramen for me on my birthday. I was so excited when I first met Kakashi and recognized his smell and thought that I actually had a sensei who cared for me as a person and not a piece of garbage. I guess I got issues, huh? The third said, no Naruto, it's alright, I understand, but I want you to promise me you will give Kakashi a chance to make things right with you. I mean, you have to understand that he has issues also. That eye he has, the Sharingan, he got that from his teammate right before he died. He thought if he could help Sasuke then he would be honoring the memory of his teammate, and I am sorry he ignored you, Naruto. I will try and make things better after the exams, but for now just go with them. Naruto said. Alright, old man, and I guess if I am going to give him a chance then he better help me with these wings, maybe his eye will be useful for something after all. The third chuckled and said, Alright, in Naruto, you're not alone anymore, you have people who do care for you. You can't let your past hold you down or it will eat you alive. Live for today and the future. As he left in a swirl of leaves. Kurenai said, He's right, Naruto, you're not alone anymore. Go get your things and I will get mine and we can leave. Naruto nods and walks to his room to get ready, but stops when he goes to put his shirt, vest, and coat on and said, Tenchi, can you help me a moment? I am stuck. Kurenai came in ready and said, I think you're more deserving of that name now than I do, Narukun, but what do you need? Naruto said, I don't want to ruin my cloths when my wings come out, so can you help me figure something out? Kurenai nods and puts each of the items against Naruto's back and then pulls them away, making slits in them 3 inches wider than the slits, and hands them back to Naruto. He tries the shirt first and then makes his wings come out, and then tried the vest and finally his long coat he wore during the preliminaries. After he had them all on and grabbed his things, Kurenai put a henge on him to make him look like he normally did, and they left. As they walked down the street, Asuma walked up and said, Hello Kurenai, how are you holding up? I heard about Hinata. Kurenai said, I am okay now. How is your team taking it? Asuma said, Choji and Shimakuru are fine but Ino is not. She talked to Sakura and heard the truth about what happened, and now she's disgusted with Sasuke and does not know what to think. I cancelled my team's practice today, and when we left she was beating a log to death. How are yours taking it? Kurenai said, I don't know. I haven't seen them yet today. We usually meet in the afternoons since their families are mostly training them, since Shino the only one to advance. Asuma nods and looks at Naruto, and Kurenai said, he knows also Asuma. Asuma said, how are you, Naruto? Naruto said, I think Itachi should have killed the bastard with the rest of his clan, in a dead voice. Asuma winced and said, I see, so how is your training for the finals coming along? Naruto glanced at him and said, depends on when I have to face Gaara. Asuma asked, why him? You don't seem to be that worried about Shikamaru or Kiba or the other genins from Sand, so what's so special about Gaara? Naruto looked at him and then at Kurenai and said, you mean you don't know about him? Asuma blinked and said, no, what? Naruto looked around and said, do yourself a favor, tell Shikamaru that if he faces Gaara forfeit immediately or he will die. Asuma looked at Naruto and said, Naruto, Shikamaru has trained a lot, and I am sure that no matter what Kakashi has taught, he was cut off by a blast of Ki from Naruto, who said, don't ever say that bastard taught me anything. I will meet you at the gates, Kurenai-sensei. As he turned and walked away fast. Kurenai punched Asuma in the arm and said, just great, Asuma, you just had say that, didn't you? Asuma asked, what did I do? Kurenai sighed and said, look, Naruto is pissed at Kakashi right now because Kakashi has basically abandoned him and Sakura since day one as a team to focus on Sasuke, and then with what happened last night he blames him for that, also for making Sasuke feel like a king. The only thing he learned from Kakashi was tree climbing, and that was so he could mostly show Sasuke. Now if you are smart I would listen to Naruto warning, because from what he told me Gaara is like him, a Jinchuriki, but unlike Naruto he has no qualms about hurting or killing someone. The Hokage has already checked in on it, and it turns out Gaara was made a living weapon on purpose. Now I got to go and try and calm him down before he blows something or someone up, as she walked after Naruto. Asuma sighed and thought, what's up with her and why is it she is with Naruto? I need to warn Shikamaru about Gaara somehow though. I wonder why Dad has not told me about him yet. As he left toward the Hokage Tower. As Naruto was going toward the forest of death, he had to slam on the brakes as someone stepped in front of him, stopping him. He blinked and looked at the person and thought, not now, why does she have to show up now? And said, yes, Mrs. Haruno, can I help you with something? In a kind voice as he put on his emotional mask. Mrs. Haruno said, hello Naruto-san, I was wondering if you would talk with me in private a few moments. Just then Kurenai landed on the ground by Naruto and Naruto said, anything you need to speak to me about will have to be spoken in front of Kurenai-sensei here. I have things I need to do. Still in a kind voice. Mrs. Haruno said, actually I would like to talk to you alone Naruto, can we make an AP ointment then? Please. Naruto looked at her and said, anything you tell me I will tell her anyways, so you might as well tell her also. I don't keep secrets from her. Mrs. Haruno nods and said, hello Ms., I am Rukia Haruno and I am Naruto aunt, making both blink and look at her. Naruto looked at Kurenai and she nods and he said, alright, I suppose some tea won't hurt anything, as he clenched his fist. Kurenai put her hand on his shoulder and her relaxed and they followed Rukia to her home. As they arrived they saw Sakura walking toward the house and she said, hello Naruto, Kurenai-sensei, mother, what are you doing here? Both Naruto and Kurenai looked at each other and Kurenai said, your mother here said she wished to speak to Naruto and she claimed she was his aunt and offered some tea. Naruto said he would tell me whatever was said anyways since I am helping train him a little for the finals, so she allowed me to come. Sakura said, I see. Mind if I sit in on what you say? As she looked at her mom. Her mom nods and walks inside the house and held the door opened, allowing the three to walk in before she closed the door and said, please make yourself at home, I will be back in a moment after I put some water on to boil. As she left the room. Naruto looked at Sakura and said, what's going on Sakura-chan, I didn't know we were related. In a goofy voice. Sakura said, cut the act Naruto, I know about you being my cousin. The Hokage told me last night. In a soft whispering voice. Naruto paled and said, what did he tell you? Sakura said, he gave me a scroll from my father but only after I heard a little conversation in a bathroom, making both Kurenai and Naruto go wide-eyed. Kurenai asked, what kind of conversation? Feeling a knot in her stomach. Sakura said, oh nothing Tenshi, just about how my inner self is scarier than Kyuubi and a few other things. Don't worry, I don't see you as it Naruto. In fact I am only here now to get my things because I am moving out. I can't stand what my mother did to you and I told her. I also learned the truth about why I was born and to tell the truth I feel. She was interrupted by her mother who walked back into the room and said, now that the tea is on I suppose I should start to tell you why I wanted to speak with you Naruto. I think Sakura should also hear this because this concerns her also. I know you must hate me Naruto but at least give me one chance to tell you my story. If after the story you refuse to talk to me Aegean or want to kill me I will not think ill of you or try and stop you. All I ask for is a chance. Please, both of you. As she looked at them. Naruto looked at Sakura and sighed and said, I guess Kami wants to make my life a joke today and I am being asked by everyone to give them a chance so why not? As he sat down on the couch and Kurenai sat beside him. Sakura sat beside her on the couch. Rukia sighed and said, it starts before either of you were even born. I was 15 at the time and my parents who were merchants were both killed during a supply trip by bandits. I was also a civilian and we lived above our family store. It was in a village about 2 days travel from Konoha and after they were killed the bank foreclosed on our home and kicked me out. I had no money and the only skills I had were as a merchant but with no place to stay I wound up living on the streets. It was not long before I was offered a place to stay and a job as a party girl. Sakura looked at her mom and thought, so she was a prostitute, this just makes me feel even worse about myself. Rukia said, at first all I had to do were a few dances and show a little flesh. I did not want to be whore, but I found out that about a week in that I had to pay for my place to stay with 500 a week or else I would become a slave. I got desperate because I only made around 300 a week off of tips and dances, and so I tried to leave, but the boss of the place locked me up in a room for 2 weeks with no food and only a glass of water every 2 days. He then told me I was 1200 in the hole after he took the monet I had already made. That was when Jiraiya-sama came in with your father Naruto. Naruto looked at her and she said, Jiraiya-sama was trying to get Minato-sama to agree to have a bachelor party and he was pretty wasted, but Minato kept saying your mother would kill him and he did not need one. Your father left without a second glance, but Jiraiya-sama decided to boast about himself and started flashing money around to any who would listen to him brag. I made 3,000 that night and I paid my boss and left the village looking for somewhere to make a new start away from my embarrassment. On the road I was attacked by some bandits and they stole my money and were about to rape me when Jiraiya-sama and Minato-sama showed up. They killed the bandits, but one got away with my money and Jiraiya-sama felt sorry for me, so they brought me to Konoha. When we got here they helped me get a job at the library and also a place to stay, but I could only barely survive off of that, but then the library burned down thanks to some stupid genin and I lost my job and I got scared because I was afraid I would be back on the street and would wind back up in trouble like I was before, so I tried to think of some way to survive when I met your father Chad, Sakura. He was looking for someone who could help as a midwife and was wondering if I knew anyone who could help. I asked if it was for his wife and he said that it was for his sister and that she did not want to use some random ninja during her pregnancy. I lied and told him I did because I needed the job and everything was fine until your mother hit her 6th month of pregnancy. When she did, she started having complications and they discovered I did not know anything, so Chad went to fire me for lying to him, and since I was living in their home at the time I had no place to go and only a small amount of money, so my fear made me do something I have regretted since that day. I told Chad that if he did not do what I tell him I would sell out your mother and father to Iowa because I knew they had kept their relationship a secret from your father's enemies. As she said this, Naruto was clenching his fist and Kurenai gasped. Sakura remained silent and Rukia said, anyways, I told him if he would agree to marry me then I would keep my lips shut and he would not tell anyone what I threatened. He agreed and he lied to his family and told them he loved me so they would let us be married, never telling them what I did. Then about a month later he went missing on a mission, and since I had no job I found out I also could not touch any of the money he lived on because to do so had to have a blood relation of the Uzumaki family, so I became scared Aegean, but Naruto father let me become a member of the civilian council as the library fund advisor since I had experience as a librarian. Then Chad returned nearly dead and he was furious because he was told how I tried to get to the money in his account when I thought he was dead, and he threatened to have me arrested for treason, but that night an Iowa assassin came and tried to kill your mother. Not because of the fact she was Minato wife, but because she was the Rasenkage of Whirlpool before it was destroyed. I bluffed and told him that was a sleeper spy I told about her, and if anything happened to me I had friends who would send the info I had, so he backed down, but not before I made sure that I had a way to survive if he did die on a mission, so I forced him to have it. This all of them were looking at her and Naruto said, you know, if I was really the demon you said I was I would kill you right now. As he held his hands out for all to see as blood flowed from his hands where his nails dug into them. Sakura said, Mother, I don't know what to think of you. I mean, as she looked away. Kurenai remained silent and said, I think you should continue your story now, Ms. Haruno, because as it stand now I can guarantee you won't get another chance, as she put her hand on Naruto's shoulder. Rukia nods and said, right, well anyways, as you know the Kyuubi came and Minato, Kushina, and Chad all died, and I knew who Naruto was since I had heard Minato and Chad argue over it, and so I chickened out and joined a majority of the council asking for his death even though I knew we were wrong. I thought of only myself until Sakura was born. When I had her I stopped worrying about myself and worried about her. That was why when the third asked me that day if I would take you, I knew if I did they would hurt Sakura and I couldn't take the thought of her getting her. She was all I had in the world, so I made sure the third would never ask me again by calling you a demon and acting like others do. I thought that if you never knew what I said or the truth about how things happened, then my sins would never come back to haunt me. I was only 17 when I had Sakura. I was scared and stupid back then, and I know I will never be able to make it up to either of you what I have done, but I had to try and ask for both of your forgiveness. Please, forgive me, and if my saying I am sorry is not enough, then tell me what will be and I will do it. If you want, I will commit ritual suicide, but please, you now know of my sins, please pass judgment on me. As she sat on her knees with her head on the floor bowing toward Naruto and Sakura. Naruto was silent for several moments and said, "Do you really mean you have changed from the person you were?" Rukia said, "Yes, please allow me to prove it." Naruto sighed and looked at the ceiling and said, "If you would have asked me this before we went on our first C-rank mission, I would have told you to kill yourself and never looked back. However, on that mission I saw how desperate people can be when they have nothing left. I also understand you wanting to protect Sakura, so I will give you a task." Making all three women look at him, Rukia asked, "What is it?" "Whatever it is, I will do it." Naruto reached into his vest and pulled out a scroll and grabbed a pen off the desk and began writing, and after several minutes he stopped and rolled the scroll up and said, "This scroll contains a list of names. The people on this list are people I consider family to me. If you want my forgiveness, then you will have to go to each of these people and talk to them. Find out what they think of me and why they are people I care for. Once you have talked to each of these people, come back and talk to the last person on the list, and when you do, I want you to tell me exactly what you have learned from talking to these people. If you truly learn what I hope you will, I will forgive you, but if you don't, then you're not really sorry to me and only doing this to get Sakura to move back in. Now if you will excuse me, I need to go blow something up." As he got up and left, Kurenai got up and followed, and Sakura said, "Mom, I don't know what to say. I mean, I am upset at you, but like Naruto, I also saw the pain and suffering and desperation of people when we went to Wave. I saw a little 5-year-old girl begging for food and saw a little boy who had lost all hope. I don't know what to think at the moment. When you go to tell Naruto what you learned, let me be there also. That way maybe I can understand what to feel. For right now, I don't hate you, Mom, for what you did before I was born. I pity you. I don't know what to think about what you did after I was born, though. It's going to take some time for me to understand that. I still can't live here right now. I need some time to think. I already talked to Tenten and she's going to let me stay at her place for a little while, so I need to get the rest of my stuff." As she got up and went to gather her things before leaving, Kurenai caught up with Naruto at the gates to the Forest of Death and she said, "Are you okay?" Naruto said, "No, I am not. I want to hate her. I really do, but I can't because I understand her fears better than anyone. I know what it's like to be hungry, scared, alone, and now that I am with you, I don't feel that way, but if we ever broke up, I don't think I am strong enough to go back to being alone. It scares me to think about, and I might be just as desperate as she was. That's what makes me upset the most. I don't hate the woman who blackmailed my family and used them. I pity her." As he looked at the sky, Kurenai said, "I know, Naruto, I understand also. I know what it's like also to be alone and scared." Naruto looked at her and said, "Really? You never told me that." Kurenai said, "I had just entered the academy when my mother was killed on a mission. I was scared and confused. I knew how to cook a little and also how to shop for groceries a little, but I did not have very much money. I got desperated, and luckily for me, a friend of my mother's got me a job to work at on the weekends to give me a little money, but I had to be careful with it or I would not have enough food and utilities. It was not enough to go use on silly little things like most kids my age did. I remember kids making fun of me because I did not have any parents anymore and that I would never amount to anything. That's why I vowed to myself to become a true female ninja like my mother and make a name for myself. So that way I can prove I was something. Naruto sighed and said, life's up. Kurenai giggled and laughed and said, yes it is. Now come on, the others are probably waiting on us. Don't want to be later than Kakashi. As she placed her hands on his shoulder and they shushined to the tower. For those wondering why I did not have her just shushin them straight to the tower, it takes a lot of chakra to do shushin over a long distance, and it's like 5 miles across the forest of death to the tower and also around 5 miles from her apartment, so she would have been exhausted from using shushin to go that far, so that's why I did not have her do it. A little earlier in the Hokage Tower the third said, so you three understand what has happened to Naruto. I want you to find out the extent to the change to his body with the death of the Kyuubi as well as his actual skill level. I also want this to remain an S-rank secret for the time being. I don't want to start even more trouble with the village for now. Now everyone but Kakashi may leave. Jiraiya and Anko both bowed and left using shushin, and the third said, Kakashi, I must warn you about something else. As of right now Naruto blames you for what Sasuke did. Kakashi said, but sir, why does he blame me? Not understanding. The third said, Kakashi, Naruto knew from the first day on your team you were the Anbu Inu, he remembered your smell and knew you helped him as a child. He thought that with you as his sensei he would actually be treated as a person, but after the first day you threw him away to focus mostly on Sasuke. He blames you because you gave everything to Sasuke while ignoring both him and Sakura, and then Sasuke goes to not only defect but also hurt one of his only friends in the worst possible way. You have screwed up with him, Kakashi, and you have better use this chance helping him to fix it, because I doubt you will get another chance. Now Kurenai is there for emotional support for Naruto because they have a friendship. She was there for him after his first kill when you weren't. He trusts her and has told her things he has not even told me, so you may not have a warm reception with her also because she is protective of him. Now go. Kakashi nods and disappears in a swirl of leaves. When he arrived he saw Naruto and Kurenai both arrive in a swirl of leaves and he said, yo. Making everyone look at him, and Naruto scowled. Kakashi thought, damn, he really does blame me. I guess I did screw up after all. Jiraiya saw this and sighed before saying, alright Gaki, drop the henge so we can see what we are dealing with. Naruto nods and looks at Kurenai, who cancels the just you, and everyone gasp at the change, and Kakashi thought, he looks exactly like his father now. Jiraiya thought, there is no denying you are your father's son. Anko licked her lips and thought, your boyfriend has become hot, Kuru-chan. You better claim him before someone else does. Kurenai asked, have you been informed about the rest of his changes? Jiraiya said, we know about the Kyuubi being dead. Is there anything else? Kurenai sweat drops and said, oh yeah, you might want to prepare yourselves for this one. Go ahead Naruto. As she steps away. Naruto nods and leans forward a little, and suddenly 2 huge angel wings pop out of his back, and Anko said, holy shit, the Gaki went from being a demon boy to a fallen angel, talk about irony. Naruto glared and said, shut up chicken as he smiled and stuck out his tongue. Anko pulled out a kunai and threw it at Naruto, whose left wing moved in front of him automatically and deflected it. Everyone looked and Naruto said, whoa, that was cool, it reacted on its own. Jiraiya said, so besides being taller and having wings, do you feel any different? Naruto thought a moment and said, I feel lighter, like I lost a lot of weight. I also feel a lot stronger and like I have more chakra. Jiraiya thought a moment and said, alright Gaki, let's start off with you mass training. I want you to create as many Kajbunshians as you can in one go so we can see how much your chakra reserves have been affected. Naruto nods and puts his hands in a seal and said, Taju Kajbunshin no Jutsu, and suddenly the entire area was covered in clones. Kakashi went wide-eyed and pulled up his hayate and said, it looks like there are around 1200 here. Naruto frowned and said, it's strange, I created just as many as I used to, but I don't feel like I used as much chakra as I used to. Kakashi looked at Naruto and said, "You could make 1200 at a time, Naruto." Jiraiya said, "He maxed out at 1500 when he used Kyuubi chakra also, and he maxed out at 1000 on his own before Kakashi. You should have known as his sensei what he could do." Kakashi frowned and thought, "Great, does everyone know how much I ate up? Though I do admit this was impressive, if I had known he could have done this and had knew about the benefit, I could have helped his chakra control a lot," as he realized he really did screw up. Jiraiya said, "Alright Gakis, divide into 12 even groups, Anko will take 3, Kakashi will take 3, Kurenai will take 3, and I will take 3, and I want the real Naruto with me also. Anko, have him work on whatever you were teaching him. Kurenai, I want you to work on his chakra control, seeing where it is at. If it has changed, work with him on whatever he needs improvement on. If it has gotten better, teach him the next exercise in the workout. Kakashi, I want you to take your group and start teaching him any wind jutsu you have copied. If my guess is right, with his natural affinity as wind, then those wings can be used like that sand girl used her fan to help him amplify the effect. Now divide up and move to separate areas. Don't dispel any of you unless you run out of chakra or Naruto dispels you. Also don't do any Tiahutsu. I will work with the original on that while I test his real body. Now go." Everyone nods and they divided up, but Kakashi did not like the way his group looked. 300 people who looked like his sensei all frowning at him. Yeep. This was going to be a long day for him. Kurenai pulled her group over by a stream and said, "Alright, I want 100 of you to work on tree climbing, 100 water walking, and 100 leaf balancing." Each group nods and began working, and Kurenai frowned and said, "Well, it looks like your control is actually better now than before, since none of you seem to be wasting any chakra doing these exercises. I want the 100 who did the leaf exercise to continue to do it, but on top of water also. I want the ones on water to also get a leaf and do both exercises. The ones on the trees, I want to do them also, but with kunais instead of leaves." Each nodded and began to work, and when a few went up in smoke on both water and the trees, she said, "Alright, now we got a guide to go by, let's continue." And thought, so his control is high chunin. It has gone up, but it still needs some work. Anko looked at her group and said, "Alright Gakis, I want all 300 of you to divide into groups of 50 and start working on those 5 jutsu I gave you. I want you each to do them until you dispel. The last 50 I want you to test out those wings by dodging these," as snakes flew out of her coat at them. Kakashi said, "Alright, I am going to teach you Fuden, date up a great breakthrough." One of the clones said, "I already know that one." Kakashi sighed and said, "Alright, how about Fusajin Dust Wind?" Each of the clones looked at each other, and Kakashi said, "Alright, I want 50 of you to work on the Fuden Datapa and make sure you can still use it, and I want 50 of you to memorize these hand signs and begging working on them also," as he demonstrated the jutsu going slow enough for each of them to see. 100 of the clones quickly left to go work on those, and Kakashi said, "Alright, let's see, while they are working on them, do any of you know Fuden, Dai Kameidachi Great Cutting Whirlwind?" After saying that none of them knew it, he smiled and said, "Alright, I want 100 of you to work on this jutsu," as he demonstrated it, and then the 100 left to practice it. Kakashi turned to the last 100 and said, "Alright, the last 2 I know are K's no Yaibo Blade of Wind, and Kameidachi Cutting Whirlwind Technique. I want you to divide into 2 groups of 50. Here are the 2 techniques." As he demonstrated them, after the group broke off to try the jutsu, he sat down and waited about 30 minutes and then went to check on the group. When he found the first group, he thought, "Okay, well, they do know that jutsu, but it's a good idea to make sure it's mastered." As he went to the next group and thought, "Damn, he's nearly got that one down." As he went to find the next group, he fell on his, but when he found that not only had most of the clones figured out the jutsu and were trying to modify it, He then went to find the last two groups and he thought as he went to sit back down, I ed up big time. For him to get those techniques that good means he is a jutsu freak. He's getting them almost as fast as the Sharingan did for Sasuke. I had a prodigy on my team and ignored him. No wonder he hates me. As he sat down to sulk. A Kajbunshin arrived a moment later and said, "Hey Kakashi-sensei, we got this jutsu down, can you show us something else?" Kakashi said, "Sure, anything you interested in." The clone said, "We want to learn those jutsu you and Zabuza used. The water just you if we can." Kakashi smiled behind his mask and said, "Sure," as he followed the clone to the group he came from. Jiraiya led Naruto away from everyone and said, "Alright Gaki, I want you to have 100 of your clones to go and work on the Rasengan, the next 100 I want to work on Doden, Yomi Numa Swamp of the Underworld. I want 50 of you to work on Hari Jizu, Underworld Guardian Spikes. The last 49 I want to experiment with the wings and see if you can fly and what else they can do. The real Naruto I want to fight me so I can test you. Ready, go," as he charged Naruto. Later that afternoon the Hokage was in his office when a knock hit on his door and he said, "Come in," and the door opened and several people walked in. The third looked up and saw Shibi Aburame, Inoichi Yamanaka, Shuza Akamaiki, Shikaku Nara, Sum Inuzuka, Ibiki Morino, Homura and Kaharu. He said, "Thank you all for coming on short notice. I am sure you are all wondering why I have called you all here." Kaharu said, "I am sure you have your reasons." The third nods and said, "Now what is about to be discussed in this room will be an S-rank secret. I want you all to understand if you speak of it without my permission I will have you executed immediately. Does everyone understand?" Everyone nods slowly and the third said, "Now as you all know there was an attack last night and the entire Hyuga clan was killed along with Sasuke Uchiha. Now this event has left our village in a weakened state even worse than we were back after the Kyuubi attack. Morale is at an all-time low and our defense has already been sabotaged by Orochimaru once when he entered the Forest of Death to recruit Sasuke Uchiha. Now I will tell you why I have called you here. Konoha needs something that will not only scare our enemies but also give our village a moral boost. It just happens that thanks to another incident that happened last night also we now have that. Making everyone question what he was talking about. Ibiki asked, "What are you talking about, sir? I have not heard of any other incident." The third said, "I know, in fact besides myself only 5 other people know of this. As of 8 a.m. this morning the Kyuubi no Kitsune that was sealed into Naruto Uzumaki is dead," making everyone gasp. Inoichi said, "How sir?" Ibiki asked, "Who did it sir? Who killed Naruto? Let me know so that I may have some fun with them." The third chuckled and said, "Settle down everyone, Naruto is not dead. Far from it actually." Shikaku asked, "How is that possible sir?" The third said, "I suppose I should start with telling a truth I have hidden from everyone. The truth is I know who Naruto parents were all along. Naruto real name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze." Making everyone go wide-eyed as he continued, "He is the son of Minato Namikaze the Yondaime Hokage of Konoha and Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze, the Kyuubi Rasenkage of Whirlpool. Now why this is important is because the Uzumaki family has a bloodline that is carried by the females of their family." Homaru said, "But Naruto is a male." The third smiled and said, "Not when he uses his sexy no jutsu he isn't." Everyone blinked and Sum said, "What do you mean sir?" The third said, "The sexy no jutsu that Naruto has demonstrated was an accidental jutsu that he created when attempting to do a henge. In actuality it is a shapeshift on a cellular level. It actually turns him into a woman. It turns his entire body into one. When he first created it before he figured out how to get out of it he was in it long enough to have a monthly cycle." Making everyone gasp. After everyone got over their shock the third said, "Anyways as I was saying, the Uzumaki females have a bloodline where they possess an inner personality. There are currently two Uzumaki in the world. One is Naruto and the other is his cousin whose identity will remain a secret. Anyways, she also has this bloodline. The inner personality is not what makes this so special, as all it really does is annoy the primary personality. That is not what makes it important. To actually activate the bloodline, the primary personality has to do acts that disgust the inner personality until it wants to leave. When the inner personality decides to leave, it dies, and then the girl's body will change and get some kind of special bonus like more chakra, faster speed, more strength. Each girl is different. Now, why I am explaining this to you: Naruto, after he heard about the death of Hinata, he cried and mourned her, as well as consoled another friend of Hinata in his female form, because he did not want to be blamed by someone for this attack because of their own ignorance. When he did that, the Kyuubi as a demon could not stand seeing him like that and must have wanted to leave Naruto to escape from being in what it considered a weak host, and the bloodline killed it. Everyone digested the information and Inoichi asked, "How can we be sure that it is truly gone?" The third said, "Well, besides the fact that Naruto's body has changed, the seal having completely went away along with his whiskers, and the fact that there is no demon chakra in him, nothing really." Each of the people gathered thought over what they had heard, and Shikaku asked, "So what exactly have you called us here for? I mean, if you are wanting to keep the fact Kyuubi is finally dead a secret, then there must be some reason." The third said, "Yes, there is. Now, because of the Kyuubi dying, Naruto's body has had a major transformation. Please look into my crystal ball to see what I am referring to." As he pulled out his viewing ball. As the ball came into view, everyone gathered around and then gasped, and the third said, "As you can see, he is now the spitting image of his father along with his wings which do work. Now I have had this morning Jiraiya, Kakashi, Anko, and Kurenai all working with him, and Jiraiya, would you please give everyone your report?" The wall behind everyone shimmered and Jiraiya appeared and said, "Well, let's start off with his stats. His chakra reserves are larger than mine and the third's put together, and his chakra kantal is high chunin. His speed is low junin, physical strength is only low chunin, but his ninjutsu is where the fun begins." As the third already knows, he has known the Hiraishin for some time now, making everyone gape. He can do the Rasengan currently with the help of a Kujbunshin, but he is working on doing it without the clone's help. Before today, using only his chakra, he could make 1000 Kujbunshin at a time, but with the Kyuubi chakra, after I taught him to use it, he could make 1500. Now that the Kyuubi is gone and his body has changed, he maxes out at around 1200. That does not mean that is his chakra level divided to 1200 though. It's just for some reason his body won't let him exceed a certain level, which would then put a mental strain on him. Kakashi has already taught him around 15 jutsu today that he has mastered, added to the ones Anko and myself have already taught him this month, including being able to summon Gambunta. He is basically a one-man army. Everyone were thinking of the implications of having him this strong, and Inoichi asked, "Do the wings have any other function besides flight, or do they let him fly?" Jiraiya said, "They do let him fly, and they work mostly on instinct. They block weapons, and when he uses wind jutsu, he can use them as a fan user from Suna would a fan. They also are a chakra reserve for him." The third said, "What do you mean?" Jiraiya said, "When I had him summon Gambunta earlier to make sure he still could, his wings went back into his body. Apparently half of his chakra is stored in those wings. When he uses half, they have to wait until he rests before coming back out. That is all we know for sure so far." The third said, "Very well. Now the reason I called you all here is because, as Jiraiya stated, Naruto could be a one-man army. The fact he looks like his father and knows all three of the moves that made him famous will put Iwa on edge and back away from attacking us. Since we also know that Orochimaru is planning something for the finals of the Chunin exams, it would be a good chance for the second yellow flash of Konoha to emerge, to boost our own reputation but also to make our enemies back down. What I want though is, in order for this to work, Naruto will have to represent himself as a leader that the other ninja of our village would be willing to march into battle with. This is where I want your help." Shikaku said, "You want us to train him?" The third said, "Yes, but Before you decide, let me give you all a little more info to help you decide. The Naruto you all remember seeing as a child is not the real Naruto. If people would have given him a chance when he was younger, they would have discovered what I already knew and what the ones I have teaching him now have discovered. Naruto is a practical prodigy. If he reads something in a book or scroll, he only gets the basics of it, but if he hears something or actually sees it, he has a photographic memory. You all remember his pranks where he lead Chunin, Junin, and Anbu all across the village for hours. Those pranks were actually the attack patterns we used on Iwa during the last war. Koharu asked, "What do you mean?" The third said, "When Naruto was younger, I had Naruto tested by Itachi. He took Naruto to the Anbu private training ground and ran the course one time and let Naruto watch. Naruto from that one time was able to run the entire course in less than 7 minutes, bypassing each of the traps, infiltrate the objective area, retrieve the item and escape by designing his own strategy. I had suspected this but could not probe it until then, and from that day I would tell him stories over ramen or during our walks about different things, and I would change the names of people and places but give the exact geography of the area and the number of units and tell how they would move, attack, counter-attack, and flank, withdraw and feint. I then would wait a few months and set up some kind of challenge where I offered him ramen or something he wanted, and I would have our patrols set up to run the exact patterns the ones in my stories went, and Naruto, by watching only 5 minutes, would either use the plans I gave him that we used or improve off of them. Instead of using an exploding tag or paint as he often substituted, he would instead use high pollen flowers to block the noses of the members of your clan Sum. For the ones with Hyuga in them, he would use mirrors." Shibi asked, "Mirrors, sir?" The third said, "Since there are no Hyugas left, I guess I can tell you. Their bloodline could not see through reflective material like mirrors. Naruto experimented and discovered this on accident. How do you think he stole all of the Hyuga underwear that one day he hung them on the front gates? He tied a mirror on his chest and back and using his stealth skills to bypass any patrols. Anyways, what I am saying is Naruto is a lot smarter than he let people know. All the jutsu he learned from Kakashi, he had a Kajbunshin watch him do the jutsu one time slow enough for him to see the hand signs and the effect, and then he would go and work on it. In fact, a few he had also started modifying himself. If you have him read from books and scrolls, he won't get it unless he reads it multiple times, but show him things, then he will shock you by how good he is. Add in the fact he can use his Kajbunshin and everything they learn goes back to the original when dispelled. You have someone who has a learning curve of the Sharingan but the ability to adapt and think on his feet of a possible Sannin or Kage." Inoichi said, "If what you said is true and the fact he has all those high-level jutsu, why is he going to be in the Chunin exams? Why not just advance him?" The third said, "Two things. One, there is another Jinchuriki in the exams and he is mentally unstable. Naruto is probably the only one who can fight him besides myself or Jiraiya. If we are attacked like I fear we will, then Suna may have betrayed us because it goes against the treaty we formed to send someone like Gaara here without warning us. I believe with what I have seen and heard about him that he is the key to the enemy's plan to attack, since he can release the demon at will, allowing it to control his body. Since Orochimaru is involved, the possibility of summons is also there, so Jiraiya will have to deal with them and I will have to deal with Orochimaru and possible the Kage as well if they have betrayed us. No offense to anyone else, but Naruto is the only other person in this village who could go toe-to-toe with a Jinchuriki and live. If Naruto can neutralize Gaara during the actual exam, then he would be a wild card our enemies would not be expecting, and using the jutsu he knows if he had some better strategies, a better understanding of our own units, so he can add his Kajbunshins into aid or replace any units that are injured or killed, making him not only a hero for our forces but also something for our enemies to fear. That is what I want your help in. Training him into a more effective leader. He already is a tank in battle, and with your help he could save all of our in a little over a week. I plan to turn him into a symbol for our village. With Orochimaru defection and Tsunade on her own self-exile, Jiraiya is the only Sannin we have we can count on. That is why I want your help to turn Naruto into the next Sannin. Each of the people gathered there listened to the third, and Shuza asked, Okay, I understand why you ask Ibiki, Shukaku, the elders, and Shibi here, but why me and Inoichi? The third said, I believe anything either of you might be able to teach him would be useful because knowledge is power. Knowing your allies is just as important as knowing your enemies, and by having each of you help train Naruto, you can also decide then if I have made the right decision in wanting to turn him into a Sannin. Now who is willing to do this for the good of Konoha? One by one they thought it over and agreed, and the third said, Good, here in each of these scrolls is the Kinjutsu Kujbunshin no Jutsu in it. I want you all to take one and go and learn it today, and first thing in the morning at 7 a.m. I want you to meet at the tower in the Forest of Death and use that jutsu to help teach several things at once to different Kujbunshins, Shukaku. I would also like for you to inform your son Shikamaru also of this, including Naruto true history. I have reports from his sensei that his IQ is actually over 200. I want him to bring some shogi and go games with him and have him play them with Naruto. As you know, those games were originally designed off of battlefield tactics, so that would also help him since your son has never lost from what I have heard. Don't teach him Kujbunshin though, since he does not have the reserves for it, Shibi. I would also like your son Shino also to come and play those as well, since he is also quite brilliant at making plans from what I have heard, and anything else you feel would be important. Inform him also of the truth of Naruto also. Now remember, this is S-rank secret and must not be told to anyone. I don't allow, especially Danzo, because as you all know he has wanted to turn Naruto into a weapon since the day he was born, and if he heard about this he would demand it and reveal it to the entire council, and as you all know most of the council is behind him when it comes to Naruto. Thank you all for this help, and hopefully everything will work out as I have planned. Each of them left, and the third smiled and thought, Now Naruto, it's time to show the world the real you. I hope you're ready for what I have planned. That evening, after Naruto cancelled his Kujbunshins in groups of 50, Jiraiya, Anko, Kakashi, and Kurenai all gathered together around the passed out Naruto, and Jiraiya said, So you all heard now what the old man has planned for tomorrow. Each of them nodded, and Kurenai went over and picked Naruto up with Anko help, and Kakashi said, Why don't you guys let me take him home? He is my student for a few more days before he outranks me, and I am sure you guys could use the rest. Kurenai shot a look at Anko, who said, We would, but you don't know where the Hokage has had him moved to. Ever since the second assassination attempt on his life in the hospital after the second exam, the Hokage had him moved to a more concealed location. Kakashi asked, What second attempt? When was the first? Making all three of the other adults look at him with sweat drops. Jiraiya said, Kakashi, Orochimaru tried to assassinate him by poison right after the preliminaries. If it had not been for Anko summoning the same kind of snake and letting the medics create an anti-venom, he would have died. Then why he was in the hospital recovering from that, another assassination attempt happened on him by that girl on the Sound Genin team. Kiba walked into his room in time to stop her and save his life. Anko said, After that, while I have been helping train him in the morning, I have been giving him small doses of anti-venom of every snake I can summon. We found out all his body needs is a sample of the anti-venom, and that snake can't hurt him besides the actual bite. Kakashi looked down, realizing how little he actually knew, and said, Then tell me where he is now staying. Kurenai said, Sorry Kakashi. He's still pissed at you right now. Even though he worked with you, he needs time to get over this. You showing up and pressuring him will not help anything, and there are only around 5 people who know where Naruto is staying for his protection, so I am sorry, I won't tell you until Naruto is stable. A lot of emotional damage has been done lately, and I won't have him harmed anymore. You want to make it up for your mistakes. Don't forget you also still have another student you have ignored also. As she nods, and both her and Anko shushin with the passed out Naruto away. Kakashi sighs and said, I screwed up, didn't I, Hara? As he was sent into a tree by Jiraiya fist. As he started to stand up, Jiraiya shoved him back down and summoned a toad to sit on him and said in a commanding voice, Now listen here, Kakashi. I did not want to do this in front of the Gaki or those women, so you will shut up and listen to me or I will put you in the hospital for the rest of your life. I heard about what you did to the Gaki since he joined your team. I also know about other things that has happened to him. You have been a failure when it came to being a teacher to two of your students. Now I am going to give you a little info on your precious Uchiha that you may not know. You remember how he got that curse seal. The only reason he got it instead of being killed along with Sakura was because Naruto saved them both. Your damn favorite student was willing to give up not only the test but was willing to let his teammates die so he could escape. Sakura did not see it but Naruto did. Sasuke, when Sakura was busy watching Naruto fight Orochimaru with everything he had, was backing away to run away. Naruto created a Kajbunshin who punched Sasuke in the stomach back to where the fighting was so he would have to help. Now that he went and did what he did, Naruto is pissed at you because he knows that had the third not told you that I was going to train him and you focus on Sasuke, that you would have had someone else train him while you personally trained Sasuke anyways. He's not stupid, that was all an act to save his life. He's also more observant than people think. Now that Sasuke dead and you're here acting like a sensei for once, he thinks you're just doing it out of guilt and pity or that he's a replacement. He's also too prideful to actually say these things, but anyone who really knows him can read him like a book. Pity and guilt are two things he can't stand, so you have better start making things right with him, because if you don't, not even the Ing Shinigami will save you from my wrath. As he left in a swirl of leaves. Once the toad went up in smoke, Kakashi slowly got up to his feet and started to move when several snakes caught him and wrapped him in a crush hold, and Anko walked out of the forest with a kunai in her hand and said, "Hello, Kakashi." Kakashi sighed and said, "What is it, Anko? If you're here to tell me how much I have ed up as a sensei, I get it. I am the worst ever." Anko smiled evilly and said, "Nope, that's not why I am here. I think everyone else is doing a fine job of pointing that out. Why I am here is to tell you not to look for him when he's not training. The Gaki's finally found something in his life that he has always wanted. Love and happiness. I won't tell you who she is because he wants to protect her, but she has accepted him fully. She is the only person who his emotional mask has been completely removed by, and if you try and find him to talk to him, you will most likely discover who she is also, and if that happens, he will kill you to keep it a secret, that is if she does not do it first. You have been removed from his life by your own actions because you betrayed his trust, Kakashi, so now if you want back in it, you're going to have to earn it back, and it won't be easy. Well, that's all I wanted to tell you, but if you ever do get close to him again and hurt him like you have, I will kill you." As she had the snakes squeeze him a moment and then they went up in smoke. Kakashi asked, "What do you mean I betrayed him?" Anko stopped and looked at him like he was stupid and said, "You had his trust, Kakashi, something he does not give often. He trusted you from before you were his sensei and the first day because of what you did for him when he was younger. After that day when you treated him like the villagers every day by ignoring him or cutting him down with your critical evaluation of his shortcomings without telling him how to improve. Tell me, who in this entire village could he have went to get the info on how to improve his chakra control? Who could he talk to about his speed? Who could he go to work on his taijutsu? Where could he go to get jutsu besides his Kajbunshin? The only ninja he knew for sure who could help him was the Hokage, but since he is always busy in the tower and has other things he has to do, who could he really turn to? Iruka could teach him only the leaf balancing. With his reserves, Kakashi, he could not actually learn that until he already had some form of control like tree climbing. You were his only hope at the time and you would berate him and leave him to the wolves. He was on a team but he was also alone. That is how you betrayed him, Kakashi. You ignored him. As she melted into mud. Kakashi slowly got to his feet, Aegean, looking to see if anyone else would attack him, and he sighed and thought, he had no one to go to. I thought this team was like mine. Sakura was a fangirl like Rin, but Sakura always ignored her own training to look at Sasuke. I saw Sasuke as myself, but Sasuke was not me. He only cared about power in himself, And I saw Naruto as Obito, but Obito had an entire clan to help him and friends. Naruto had neither. As he let a tear fall, he left in a swirl of leaves. When he arrived back in the village, he quickly went to the Junin lounge to get some sake to drink and sat down at a table. A few minutes later, Asuma sat down at the table and said, "So how are things with you and Naruto?" Kakashi slammed his own head into the table and said, "Does everyone know how much I ed up as a sensei? Does everyone take joy out of kicking me while I am down? Do you all have some kind of bet on who can kick my balls down my throat?" Suddenly Guy appeared and said, "Is that a challenge, my youthful rival? If so, I will kick your balls down your throat the most, or I will run 200 laps around the village on my thumbs, and if I can't do that I will eat 20 bowls of ramen, and if one can't do that I will ask out every person in Konoha until I get a date, and if I see a..." He fell to the ground with a smile on his face and a small blush, and Kakashi looked around the table on the floor at him, and Asuma said, "He came in to get drunk after he had to save his student Lee from being killed by Gaara earlier. Apparently Gaara want to finish what he started in the prelims." Kakashi nods and said, "I was wondering why his rants were stupider than normal. Anyways, what do you want, Asuma?" Asuma said, "I was wondering, have you noticed how close Kurenai has been toward Naruto lately?" Kakashi said, "Yeah, I noticed, but the Hokage told me it's because she is being emotional support for him with everything that has happened to him. I mean, with the assassination attempts by Orochimaru and a few other things, including what happened last night." Asuma looked around and once he was sure no one else was around said, "I suppose, but the thing is, she's acting happier than she has in years if you think about it. I mean, as long as no one is talking bad about him, she is smiling and has a look of affection about her. But remember during the first part of the exams when you called him a one-trick pony, and then the way she acted in the second exam when Naruto beat one of her students. I mean, she was not just rubbing the fact Naruto beat Kiba in your face or congratulating your student. She was rubbing the fact that he was better than you claimed. Like she was proud of him." Kakashi thought it over a few moments and said, "Now that you mention it, you're right, she does seem happier lately, and she was boasting about Naruto. I also heard recently from Anko that Naruto has finally found someone who loves him and makes him happy. Also the fact that Naruto has been moved from where he lives to somewhere safe, but it does not mean that it is Naruto who has caused this. It could just be that she has been ordered to help his emotional state longer than we think. I mean, the third told me about how Naruto had his first kill and I failed in my duties to help him, so it's possible that she was the one who was assigned to help him. She could just have found someone she likes, or she could have made friends with Naruto. He does have one of those personalities that makes others happy if you get to know him." Asuma nods and said, "I suppose you're right, and that does make more sense than the Ice Queen of Konoha falling for some genin, but if so, then who is his love?" Kakashi snorts and said, "Most likely Sakura. He's been after her for years after all, and now that Sasuke's dead, she may be using Naruto as an emotional crutch. For his sake, I hope not." As he finally realized what he said. Back with Naruto and Kurenai. Kurenai had put Naruto to bed and took his cloths off except his boxers and put him to bed after treating a few wounds he still had from today, and was getting ready to take her a bath when a knock on her door drew her attention. She looked around and saw Anko had left Aegean to go stay with Iruka. That has been happening a lot lately, so she put on a bathrobe and went to the door and opened it. Sakura was standing on the other side of the door and said, "Can I come in, Kurenai-sensei?" Kurenai nods and steps aside, and Sakura walked in and sat down. Once Kurenai closed the door and sat down also, Sakura said, "I want to talk to you about Naruto. Is he around?" Kurenai said, "He's passed out in the bedroom. Some things have happened to him lately and he's out with chakra exhaustion right now, so we can talk." Sakura asked, "What's he like? I mean, what is he really like?" Kurenai asked, "What do you mean?" Sakura sighed and said, "I have had a lot of time to think lately and reevaluate things, and I realize I don't really know him. I mean, I was expecting him to actually kill my mother today for what she said she threatened to do to his parents, but he actually offered her a chance. Not many people would do that. Kurenai leaned back and said, he's always worried about everyone else. Even at the cost of his own happiness. When he tells people he's going to be Hokage, there are times I think he lives his life like he actually is the Hokage. Sakura sat there and thought a moment and smiled and said, I think you're right, but what if people never give him a chance to be Hokage? Kurenai smiled and said, let's just say that Naruto is now closer to being Hokage than nearly everyone in this village besides about 5 people. Sakura looked at her and said, really, why is that? Trying to find out more information on her cousin. Kurenai said, sorry, you have to wait until the Chunin exams to find out. Hokage-sama orders, that reminds me, what all did you hear of our conversation in the bathroom? As she shot a look at Sakura that said, tell me or die. Sakura gulped and said, I just heard how to activate my bloodline, that Naruto was Kushina, and that you and him are together. After that, the Hokage stopped the crystal ball. And she clamped her hand over her mouth, realizing she was not supposed to mention that. Kurenai sighed and said, damn that thing, he always uses that to check on Naruto. I swear I am going to castrate him one of these days for peeking on us. Sakura asked, how did? I mean, why are you and him together? From what I have seen, you could have nearly any guy. What made you chose to be with him? Kurenai closed her eyes and said, if I tell you this, you never tell anyone. It's something I don't like to talk about and it's very personal. If you tell this to anyone, you will not only be betraying my trust but Naruto's. Do you understand? Sakura nods and Kurenai said, well, and over the next 2 hours she told Sakura about how Naruto first saved her and then she later learned it was him, saved him, then a few random times of things she thought were special, and then the day she found him on the Hokage monument after the wave mission, and then how their relationship went from there, leaving out the recent events with Kyuubi dying and him having wings. Sakura for her part was amazed at the end of the story and said, that is so romantic. I never knew he was such a sweet guy. You got lucky, and I think he did also getting you. I hope you both have a happy life as husband and wife someday. Kurenai blushed and said, maybe someday, but we still are working on our feelings and other things. It's going to take time for both of us. Sakura said, perhaps, perhaps not. You know, the life of a ninja is dangerous and you may have to move your plans forward faster. Anyways, I want to tell you thanks for talking to me and I need to go. I don't want to leave Tenten alone too much right now. She's really depressed over the loss of Neji. As she got up and left, Kurenai sighed and went to check on Naruto and saw him whimpering like he was having a bad dream, and she sighed and crawled into bed beside him to hold him, and he wrapped his wings protectively around her, still asleep. The next day, when the Hokage arrived with Ibiki, Shino, Shibi, Shuza, Inoichi, Sum, Shikaku, Sum, Homura and Kaharu arrived along with Iruka. They heard an explosion and all look and saw Naruto flying around 15 feet off the ground extremely fast as 4 huge snakes chased after him with earth spikes shooting out of the area. Traps going off with weapons flying at him along with explosive notes going off, toads shooting oil at him, and Jiraiya, Kakashi, and Anko all stood on a hill with Kurenai tied to a cross behind them as they were shooting off fire, earth, lightning, wind and water jutsu at him extremely fast. Naruto dodged a spike, quickly throwing a kunia to the right as a fire jutsu came at him. Using Hiraishin, he disappeared and reappeared 30 yards away as he flew high, dodging the snake that burst out of the ground. He then clipped his wings behind him, backflipping in air to dodge a water dragon. He then used the speed he built up from flying toward the ground to barrel roll to the left to dodge another earth spike as boulders began flying at him. He quickly flashed through hand seals and without calling a jutsu he pulled back in flight to a complete stop, flapped his wings forward, sending the water and fire jutsu that were coming at him back toward Jiraiya and Anko. He then quickly replaced himself with a log as a snake bit down where he had been a moment earlier. Naruto then flew high into the air above the treetops and then cupped his wings behind him Aegean and fell toward the earth, quickly gaining more speed as he neared the ground. He pulled up at the last second, running 3 feet off the ground. Kakashi saw this and had his dogs burst from the ground trying to bite him, and Naruto grabbed one and threw it at the snakes who were coming behind him, forcing Kakashi to release the summons or have his favorite dog ate. Naruto was still flying at Junin level speed. As he approached the hill, he quickly created a Kugebunchen who hanged into Kurenai and he caught it as he flew a little higher off the ground. The Kugebunchen started to do hand signs, and as Naruto crested the hill, the Bunchen was covered in smoke as Naruto flew higher into the air, and then he said, "Boom!" And Kurenai, who was tied behind Jiraiya, Kakashi, and Anko, exploded, blowing all 3 off the hill. Naruto slowed his speed down and shifted Kurenai, who he was holding, into a bridal carry, and he lightly landed on the ground. The moment he did, Jiraiya began clapping and said, "Well done, Gaki. You just passed the mission. Tsunade, Orochimaru and myself all failed over 25 years ago. The mission was the one where we were named the Sannin by Hanzo. An important person had been captured by Iwa and was being held in reign at the time by 1,000 Iwa nins. The person who was being held had information on the defense of each of the hidden village, including patrol patterns as well as medical records on all Chunin and Junin. Kumo had sent close to 400 ninja to capture this person. Wind had sent 300 and Konoha had sent 700 ninja, all trying to get this person and either to eliminate him or bring him to Thier village so the information he had could be used to beat the other villages. In the end of the battle, there were only 5 of us left alive. Myself, Tsunade, Orochimaru, Hanzo, and the informant himself. Last night I had Kakashi and Anko come and help recreate the battle as best as it could, and where at the end of the battle Hanzo took the man to his village and forced us to leave his country or give it to our enemies after he named us the Sannins. You yourself not only extracted the target but also nearly eliminated us as well. Good job." Naruto blushed as Kurenai, who was now on her feet standing beside him, put her hands together over her heart and in a sickening sweet voice said, "My hero," as she kissed him on the cheek, making him blush and everyone else giggle. The third clapped and said, "Well done, Naruto. Now it's time I talk to you, Shino, and Shikamaru," making all 3 look at him and walk in front of the Hokage. The third said, "Now, as you both now know, Naruto had the Kyuubi in him until recently, and I assume that you're both okay with that." Shino said, "I already knew about the Kyuubi. My clan hive informed me as a child. I find it illogical for anyone to think he and that creature are one in the same." Shikamaru sighed and said, "It's too troublesome to think of how many idiots there are in Konoha. I had suspected for a while now, but after getting it confirmed, I still don't think bad of you, Naruto." Naruto smiled, and before he said anything, the third said, "Good. Now the reason you both are here, as you have been informed, is to help train Naruto along with the others I have brought here. Now you may think this is stupid since your opponent's in the exams, but the truth is I am expecting war to break out that day. No matter what happens in the exam, I have already decided to give both Shino and Shikamaru a field status of acting Chunin. You Shino will be facing Kankuro, the puppet master, and you Shikamaru will be facing Tamari, the wind user, while Naruto will be facing Gaara in the first match. If Naruto is not able to stop Gaara as I plan, then you are both to have your matches and get to a point in the matches where you are the sure winner and forfeit. That way you won't face Gaara. If Naruto can't stop him, he will weaken him enough where a Junin I have in mind can finish the job. Do you both understand?" Both boys nod, and Naruto said, "What about me?" The third said, "Remember how I asked you if you would be willing to help me with a problem? What I want for you to do is to become the third Sannin. With Orochimaru betrayal and the fact you have faced off against him already and lived means you should be able to again. Anyways, you will become the Tenshi Sannin. The Angel Sannin. The fact you look so much like your father and know several A and S rank jutsu will make many fear you. Now we have wasted enough time and I can explain more later. Please make as many Kugebunchens as you can so we may begin." Naruto nods and creates 1200 again, and the third said, "Alright, I want 100 with me." Kakashi, Jiraiya, Anko, as you all told me last night, Naruto has a high wind affinity but can use earth and water jutsu as well. I want you to take 5 clones per jutsu and cram as many as possible into today's training. Use Kujubunshin to make yourself more available to them. Everyone who can use Kujubunshin, please make them, and each person or Kujubunshin grab 5 clones also and start teaching him what you feel he needs. Shino, Shikamaru, you're both to teach him strategy using Shoji and Go. You're also to grab 5 also each and work with them. Homura and Kaharu, I wish for you both to begin drilling every aspect of the politics of the village as you can, including the way the council works, who on the council are followers and who are leaders, how the council, the elders, and myself deals with diplomats and VIPs. You remember all those things the Shadaim and Nadaim crammed into our heads when we were younger. Everyone get started. I want 200 Kujubunshins to come with me. Any Kujubunshins that are not being used are to work on chakra control. I want the real Naruto to begin running to the walls of the forest and back again until I tell you to spar with someone. As they all separated, the third pulled the 200 he requested into the tower itself and closed the doors, locking everyone else outside. He then walked to the main battle area where the real him was and his clone melted, and he said, "Alright Naruto, Iruka here is going to watch you and help you with this part of your training. I want each of you to grab a book or scroll and begin reading. If you have any question, please ask, because this is very important. Every time you finish a book or scroll, I want you to grab another and another. Even if it is one that has been read before by another clone, read it still, since you have harder time remembering read documents. Now begin. I have work at the tower to do, so I will be back later." As he left in a swirl of leaves. Around noon, the third Hokage arrived back at the tower and said, "So Iruka, how are they doing?" Iruka said, "They have all read every document here at least 3 times, sir. I believe they should remember it." The third nods and said, "Alright, one at a time. I want you to each dispel until you're all gone and tell Naruto to return to the tower outside and rest. I will join him shortly. Iruka, I have lunch for everyone waiting at my office. Please go and bring it back here so they can eat." As the clones began to dispel, Iruka left. Around 20 minutes later, the third walked out and had Iruka following behind him with a few clones of Naruto and set the food for everyone to eat before they dispelled themselves. Naruto was sitting on the ground holding his head, and he said, "Alright Naruto, dispel them all and everyone come eat." Naruto nods, and then groups of 100 dispelled together. In about 15 minutes he had them all dispelled and everyone else was already eating, and the third asked, "Any observation anyone would like to state?" Ibiki asked, "Does this kid know how to be scared? I have used nearly every mental torture on him I can think of, and his clones actually mocked me. No wonder he passed the first test with a blank page." The third chuckled, and Sum asked, "I notice that he has increased senses. Is there a chance that the changes to his body might become a new bloodline?" The third said, "I honestly don't know. We would have to wait until he had a child to find out. Of course, we could ask someone to volunteer to help us find out. How about it? Any of you ladies interested?" Earning a glare from Kurenai and Naruto. Anko chuckled and said, "Sorry, I am taken. However, Kurenai is able and available. She could test him right now if you would like, sir." Kurenai turned beet red, and before she had a chance to say or think anything, Kakashi said, "Think about it, Kurenai, all that stamina he has. Glad to finally get a chance to embarrass her for all the times she threatened his book." Jiraiya, seeing a chance for some payback, said, "Well, what of it, kid? Think you got the balls to handle a woman like her? I bet she's a screamer and real wild animal in bed." Just then Naruto burst from the ground at both Kakashi and Jiraiya feet with a haymaker that both hit men in the nuts and lifted them off the ground as the clones grabbed the men's feet and began swinging them around several times, making them dizzy, and released them flying toward each other, where they hit each other and fell to the ground, passed out. The clones then walked over and performed a few hand seals and touched both men, who were instantly covered in smoke, and when the smoke was revealed everyone burst out laughing. Jiraiya was now a 60-year-old woman with deflated and weighed around 600 pounds, and Kakashi was a 90-year-old woman with gray hair and DD size that were saging all the way down her belly, and she also weighed about 400 pounds. The clones pulled out a water balloon and held it above both men before forming a Rasengan and bursting the balloon and letting it fall on the woman. As both men woke up and looked around, Naruto clones went up in smoke, and when they went to check themselves to see how bad their nuts had been damaged, they immediately passed out, Aegean finding them gone. At this everyone burst out laughing. Aegean, the third, looked at Naruto, who was smirking, and said, "Was that really necessary?" Naruto said, "I hate perverts and I don't like seeing men pick on women. I don't care what people say about me, but try and hurt someone like Kurenai and you will deal with me." Making Sume smile at him and thought, "Protective and loyal toward your mate, huh? I understand now why Hana, Kiba and myself have all been smelling your scent on her and hers on you here lately. I guess you're trying to keep it a secret or something. Something's going on with you both, because Kurenai would never kiss anyone, even jokingly like she did earlier to a man, and Anko keeps giving Kurenai and you looks like she's waiting for something. I wish you luck, kid, and Kurenai. You have my clan's protection as an honorary member, kid, for showing the belief that my clan follows. Protecting your pack." Sume then cleared her throat and said, "I believe they have had enough punishment for now, Naruto. Also, I would like to say this now. I believe that you have shown everyone the truth about you, and as such I would like to make you an honorary member of my clan, meaning if you or your family ever need help, we would be honored to help you as we would one of our own. Do you accept?" Naruto looked at her and bowed and said, "I am honored by this, Inazaku-sama, but I do not wish to have your clan or anyone else's punished by the ones who can't see the truth. That's why I have." He was cut off Sume dog, who jumped up and bit Naruto hand, making it bleed, and Sume also cut her hand and walked over and had her companion release his hand, and she grabbed it and said, "Your choice has been made already for you, so you can't take it back. You now have the blood of an Inazaku in you, so you have no choice but to accept us as an honorary clan to you. Your family is now our family, and if you or they are ever in danger, we will aid you." Naruto bowed his head and said, "And if yours is ever in need also, I will do all I can to aid you, as will my family." "Thank you." Sume let go of his hand and she looked and said, "Interesting, my wound has healed with only a mild scar. So has yours. Now let's eat." As she walked over to the table Iruka had set up, the third walked over and said, "You don't know how much of an honor you have just been given, Naruto. The fact her companion is the alpha male also helped means that all of the companions of Thier clan notice you as one of Thier. That is a rare honor that has only been done a total of 3 times in all my years." Naruto nods and walked over, releasing the jutsu on both still passed out men as Kurenai walked over and said, "I think she knows." Naruto said, "Possible. I mean, yours and my scent has probably been on each other for a while now, since we spend so much time together. Kiba might have noticed but chose not to say anything, and she has probably also noticed today." Kurenai nods and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You didn't have to do that for me. I could have gotten them myself." Naruto said, "What's stopping you now? I mean, I could have let you have first crack, but I figured with as many times as the pervert's been peeking at the hot springs and Kakashi reading his books, you would have had trouble stopping them long enough to get revenge, so I slowed them down for you." Kurenai stopped in her tracks and said, "You know, I never thought of that," as she turned around and marched back over to where the 2 men were finally coming around and said, "Now it's time to actually lose those," as she pulled out a kunai and both men paled before running away. Sume burst out laughing and said, "My, it seems your trickster side has infected Kurenai, Naruto. I sure hope nothing else infects her, or we may have a whole litter of little blonde hair, red-eyed, winged, tricksters running around Konoha." As she shot a look at both Naruto and Kurenai, making them realize she really did know. Naruto said, "Well, I am sure they would be little angels. After all, men all the time say Kurenai beauty is from heaven, so Everyone laughed as Kurenai blushed before she planted her fist into the top of Naruto's head, making him hit the ground. She then said, "You know, you still have a lot to learn about woman Naruto." Naruto asked, "So are you willing to teach me?" As he got up. Kurenai blushed as everyone looked at her and she said, "What's in it for me?" Naruto frowned for a moment and then smirked as an idea formed and walked over to her and whispered in her ear so no one else could hear, "Well, how about you let me treat you like a goddess for an entire day, feeding you all of your favorites while I have my Kajbunshians massage your feet, air cool you with my wings, and pamper your every need, all dressed in nothing but a toga, and then fly you up into the air and held you as we watch the sunset on a cloud, and then you can have me do anything and everything you have ever desired." Kurenai suddenly was blown back with a nosebleed, passing out as the thought of what she could have him do hit. To say everyone was stunned would have been an understatement. Naruto had just made the most powerful pervert basher in the entire village. Kakashi, who walked out of the woods seeing it was safe, asked, "What did you say to her, Naruto?" Naruto said, "Out of respect for her I refused to say. It mostly just involved certain punishments on several men who have been perverted toward her in the past, including you and Ero Sanin, and then forcing you to serve as her personal slave, all wearing a dress as all the women who feel as she does all line up and use the 1,000 years of death on you, using anything they want." Kakashi paled and backed away as everyone laughed at his misfortune. The third said, "No, really, what did you tell her though? To get that reaction out of her is unbelievable." Naruto looked at the Sandaime and said, "Oh, just." Kurenai at that moment began to stir and she wiped the blood from her nose as she stood up glaring at Naruto and said, "You are so dead. You think that night in the bath Togath," as she caught herself making everyone wide-eyed as she realized she was not alone with Naruto and that she had just said something she could not deny. Naruto slapped his head and said, "Smooth Tenshi." Kurenai sighed and the third said, "Well, I must admit, you both hid it longer than I thought you would be able to. I mean, nearly 6 weeks is pretty good in this village to have a secret." Kakashi said, 6 weeks, as he looked at Kurenai and Naruto. Jiraiya said, "Really, you have been hiding details from me, boy. What's she like?" He was immediately sent flying, this time by a Kajbunshin from behind who kicked him. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow and said, "That's twice now you created those without making hand seals." "How?" Naruto looked confused a moment and said, "I've used it so much I can make smaller numbers of them without hand seals. I guess I never really thought about it." "Why?" Anko said, "Making most jutsu sealess means you have completely mastered the jutsu. It's just rare for someone your age to do so is all." Naruto nods and then saw everyone looking at him and Kurenai and he sighed and said, "Please everyone, don't tell about me and Kurenai. We really don't know what it is we feel for each other yet, and we are taking it slow and have only really just talked and had ate dinner together. The tub deal she was talking about was me in a pair of shorts and her a bikini, and she gave me a back rub when I overdid it with training. Nothing happened besides her finding a few quirks to use against me for her own fun. I don't want people to start treating her bad because of me. I know that most of you have either liked me before or were at least neutral toward me by the fact you never openly showed me any hate or had your kids act against me. I also know the fact Kyuubi's dead now will help some others changes also, but it will take time to change people's opinions, and between now and then they might harm her to harm me. Please, I beg you." As he got down on his knees, shocking everyone because he never would lower himself to anyone. Shibi was the first who spoke and said, "We understand, Naruto, and my son and I shall remain silent on it. We respected you as you were similar to our clan." Sum said, "You already got my silent and protection. Anyone goes to harm you or those in your pack, they have us to deal with," as she pat the head of her companion. Shikaku said, "It would be way too troublesome to even think about telling." Shuza said, "Let me know when the wedding is, I will bring the food," making both Naruto and Kurenai blush and everyone else laugh. Kakashi said, "Damn it, Asuma going to rag my when he finds out he was right." He told me he thought you two were getting close, but I told him it was probably just orders. Anko looked at him and asked, how the have you lived so long? Naruto nods as everyone else slowly agrees with him, thanking them. After that they began to eat. After everyone was done eating, the third said, alright Naruto, make the Kajbunshians again. I want everyone to do as they did earlier except the real Naruto. I want you to spar while being asked questions you will have to answer while you fight. That way we can all judge your mental ability to think wisely under pressure. Naruto nods and created the Kajbunshians and asked, who will I be sparring with? The third quickly created a mud clone and reached for his robes and threw them, revealing himself in his battle garments, and he said, me. Making everyone wide-eyed. He then said, I don't want you to hold back. I also need to dust off some of my rust from sitting behind the desk so long for the fights I am expecting. You won't be able to hurt me. My mud clone will be asking you questions as we fight. Begin when ready. Naruto nods and he jumped backwards, putting space between them as he began hand seals covering the air in mist, raising a few eyebrows as many thought, he did it without calling the name. Interesting. The third began his own hand seals as he blew the mist away and then sent shurikens at the tree where Naruto was, only for him to dissolve in water. The real Naruto jumped from behind the third and prepared for to really fight. The mud clone began to speak as Naruto and the third charged into a Taijutsu match. If a high-ranking ninja from a foreign village comes to sign a peace treaty with our village, and after signing the treaty that night he conceals himself in a mask and goes and attempts to kidnap an heir to one of the clans of Konoha and was killed by the clan head of that family before he could escape, what would you do as the highest-ranking person there at the time? Naruto said as he dodged a leg sweep and sent a kick at the Sandame's head. Well, I assume you're referring to the Hyuga cloud incident that I read about earlier in the tower. I would first make sure the Hyugas had not sent someone to confront the other members of his party. The mud clone said, no they hadn't, why? Naruto sent an uppercut at the Sandame as he dodged the swipe from Emma's staff form and said, well, in that case I would have searched the nin's body and found a cloud exploding tag and a kunai from cloud. Surely if it was a kidnapping attempt then he would want to be prepared for a quick escape and confrontation. I would then jump over the wall of the clan compound and throw the kunai with the exploding tag at the wall, blowing it from the outside in. I would then put a scratch in his hiate marking him as a missing nin. At this point everyone was looking at him in confusion and the Sandame did a mule kick to Naruto, making him go up in smoke as another Naruto burst from the ground, grabbing his extended leg and throwing him. The mud clone asked, why would you do that Naruto? Naruto said, the answer is simple. It was chess. The kidnapping was a fake. If it would have been a simple kidnapping they would have sent a pawn or lower ranking ninja to do the actual mission instead of a knight like the cloud did. By using the knight, or in this case the very same ninja who signed the contract, making him a very important piece, they knew the odds were he would be killed. By making it look like he attacked the compound and then marking him as a missing nin, you can take the evidence at the scene then to the Fire Lord and the Lightning Lord, showing the remains of the kunai were from metals can be traced back in Cloud Country, and the exploding tag would have been consistent with Tier also, and you would say that the man must have became a missing nin because of his fear of peace, making the idea we oppose peace void, and that Cloud was the real threat of going to war if Tier high-ranking ninja would be willing to break the new peace treaty the same day. If Cloud said he was not a missing nin and that we faked the evidence, then you could simply ask, then why was he attacking the Hyuga compound in the first place? With all the evidence supporting our claim, then they could not admit they actually backed the kidnapping or look bad to other countries and Thier Lightning Lord, which they wouldn't, because then they would have had to pay us back for the lie with something like Thier Forbidden Scroll or one of Thier clans or bloodlines as payment. That's my opinion though. As he was sent flying backwards into a tree by Emma, who changed from a staff to an ape. The third paused and said, I see you came to a better conclusion than I did back then, Naruto. I guess I got too wrapped up in the Hyuga demand for retribution to think of that. Naruto said as he stood up, that's the problem with a lot of people. They think more about their own ambition and forget we are all part of a larger picture. The village comes first and then the people. That's the lesson I learned from my father. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. However, there are times when that is wrong, when the need to do what is right, and just then when you personally go against it. As he charged the third, only for the third to go up in a puff of smoke. Naruto jumped back, forming hand seals, and then a water dragon hit an earth dragon, collided, turning into mud, and then a mud dragon formed and blades of wind collided with the mud dragon, destroying it. Everyone was watching, and Shikakamaru got up and pulled his dad, who had taken his shirt off while his clones hadn't, said, "How is it Naruto has advanced so fast?" Shukaku walked over with Shikamaru, leaving the Kujubunshin looking at the board for Shoji, and said, "Kujubunshins. When they are dispelled, everything they learn go back to the original, so with his large chakra reserves and ability to make so many, his training goes faster than everyone, but an Uchiha except Naruto is better because he is actually getting experience using them, where an Uchiha just copies it and does not actually learn to use the jutsu or what makes it tick." Shikamaru nods as he thinks of the possibilities of this and go wide-eyed and said, "Dad, exactly how long are we planning to help him train?" Shukaku said, "Until the exams." "Why?" Shikamaru thought. "Around 100 jutsu a day plus everything else he is learning, times a week. Naruto is definitely not someone to have against you or mess with." And said, "It might be wise if our clan were to get on Naruto's good side like the Inazaku did earlier. I mean, with what I have seen already of Naruto progress and improvements as well as his learning curve. Don't think just jutsu, think of everything else he is learning." By Naruto's own words, the Hokage must have had him reading some important documents to know about the kidnapping of Hinata, since only the other clans of Konoha knew the exact details besides the Hokage. For Naruto to have that kind of information means Naruto must be reading Anbu reports or the Hokage personal files. I don't believe it would be the Anbu reports though, so if he's reading the Hokage's personal files, so. Shukaku went wide-eyed as he understood where his son was coming from and said, "I see. I do believe you are right. It seems the Sandaime has things planned out for every possible equation." As he walked over to the Kujubunshin thinking everything over. Unknown to either Nara, a pair of bugs flew away to another area not too far away and landed on the fingers of a father and son a few moments, as they then nod and returned to the documents they had brought along with the strategy books and games they had. Inoichi, hearing the idea of Naruto on the Hyuga conflict, asked, "Hokage-sama, I got one for him. What exactly would you do with the current situation of the Uchiha death and the fallout from it?" Naruto, who was fighting, narrowed his eyes, controlling his anger, and said in a neutral tone, "Well, truth is there are several things I find wrong with the current condition of the Uchiha. First is I believe that Konoha is breaking its own laws regarding the only remaining Uchiha, and I also believe that Sasuke should be given a traitor's funeral. He attempted to rape a fellow Konoha shinobi before going to an enemy ninja. I have heard people claiming he should be put on the memorial stone, and to do so would be a disgrace to not only the dead but every other ninja in Konoha forces." Inoichi asked, "What do you mean Konoha is breaking its own law regarding Itachi?" Naruto said, "By order of the Shidaime Hokage of Konoha, the council and the Hokage are not allowed to mess with clan politics. The Uchiha massacre was an internal political situation. When he was charged with their deaths, Konoha was breaking its own laws, or at least partially. Itachi lost the rights of the Uchiha clan prival edge the moment he left the village to become a missing nin. Before that we could not actually charge him, but when he did leave, Sasuke had the right to blame him with his clan's death and charge him, but now that Sasuke is dead, Konoha should reverse its stance on the Uchiha massacre. He's still guilty of all the other crimes he's committed since then, but as far as the massacre goes, Itachi is now legally being wrongly accused. I know some of you are having trouble understanding what I mean, so I will change the situation a little. Say Neji killed the entire Hyuga clan because of his father's death and that seal I read about. If he had remained in Konoha afterwards and there were no higher ranking Hyuga than him, Konoha technically could not charge him with the death of his clan. We could charge him with the death of any Konoha ninja who were on duty at the time, but everyone else would be a legal kill, at least in the eyes of the laws of Konoha. It's one of the laws I think was not thought out far enough. If Neji claimed clan politics as his motive, nobody could do jack shit about it. Am I correct, old man? Everyone was stunned and the third Hokage sighed and stopped the match and said, unfortunately you are correct. Because of that particular law, if any member of any clan killed the rest of their clan, Konoha has no actual legal law to charge them with, and if their clan had no active ninja, then they could walk the streets free as a bird like nothing happened. Soom whistled and said, I would never have thought of it like that. I always thought that law was a good thing, but with that view it is a double-edged sword. Everyone was stunned. The third said, anyways, let's continue, shall we? As he decked Naruto, but Naruto burst into water. The third said, damn, this is tough, what's the count, Kakashi? Kakashi said, 210 for you, sir. 174, correction 171 for Naruto. Naruto said, damn, this is harder than I thought, old man. As his wings faded from his back as he fell to the ground, as the Kunai Bunshin no Jutsu he used was blocked by a mudwall. The third smirked and said, well, that's official, Naruto. You just reached about 1/2 of your total chakra reserves used, making Shino and Shikamaru go wide-eyed along with Iruka. As the rest of the day went on, Naruto learned a lot of things from the clan heads and also earned a lot of respect from them. Even to the point where he passed out and all his Kujubunshin went up in smoke. The Sandaime was on his knees panting and said, I can't believe he was able to keep up with me for that long. What was the total, Kakashi? Kakashi said, 610 for you and 490 for him, sir. He learned several from you during combat and turned them back on you. I must say his ability to learn jutsu is nearly as good as a Sharingan, with it being better. Shikamaru and his father shared a knowing smirk, as did Shino and his father. The third said, I see. I think you really have not understood Naruto enough yet, Kakashi. The fact he is not coping these just you but actually learning them means Naruto is better. Getting several nods, Kakashi rubbed the back of his head, embraced, and the third sighed and said, okay everyone, thank you all for your help today, we got a lot accomplished. Tomorrow is the city-wide funeral service for the Hyuga clan. There will be no training tomorrow, but do not come to the funeral unequipped. We can't afford to be caught off guard with the threat of war hanging over our heads. Everyone is dismissed. As he shushin away, Kurenai and Anko picked up Naruto and shushin away and put him in bed, and Kurenai kissed him on the lips lightly and whispered, I am proud of you, my hero.